The Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, has a special request.
We believe that NATO countries have created a narrative that closing the skies over Ukraine would provoke Russia's direct aggression against NATO. This is the self-hypnosis of those who are weak, insecure inside, despite the fact that they possess weapons many times stronger than we have.
So you want to kill every human on this planet because Ukraine is at war.
But he also has far less experience in measuring NATO's response to Russian aggression to avoid nuclear war with Russia, something NATO has been doing for decades. The only way to enforce a so-called no-fly zone is to make it a war zone. The phrase no-fly zone, as is being used this week, is a euphemism for shooting down Russian planes. If the United States shoots down Russian planes and Russia shoots down American planes, no one knows how to prevent that from turning into an all-out war between not just Russia and the United States, but Russia and every member country of NATO. Because every member country of NATO would be obligated to come to the defense of the United States when our planes are shot down. And so Vladimir Putin could be immediately firing missiles all over Europe as well as at the United States. And if Vladimir Putin decides to go nuclear in his response because he's decided he has nothing to lose, you won't recognize London or Paris or Rome after that. You won't recognize New York or Washington, D.C. Of course, Moscow and Vladimir Putin would not exist after a nuclear exchange, but no one would feel like they won. The people left alive would experience nothing but loss, the greatest loss in human history.
Here's the thing. It goes deeper than even that.
It was believed in the 1980s that a global nuclear war could result in the planet being uninhabitable, but now scientists are certain that even a regional war could cause immense devastation and suffering across the globe. According to the scientific journal Earth's Future, even a war that only took place on one side of the planet, let's say in Asia, would be extremely problematic for someone living on the opposite side of the planet. Nuclear detonations would create firestorms, and those firestorms would create black soot. A lot of it, some 5 million tons. That black soot would end up in our atmosphere, our oceans, and drinking water. The soot that goes into the atmosphere would block out the sunlight, causing global temperatures to drop. On average, we would see a drop of 3 degrees Fahrenheit, with most of North America experiencing a 4 to 10 degree colder winter. This would cause a dramatic initial loss of plant life. Frost would cover the earth and would shorten the growing seasons by at least a month. This decrease in temperature of the earth could last anywhere between a decade to as long as 25 years. That's according to Michael Millis, an atmospheric scientist at the National Center for Atmospheric Research. So maybe you're thinking, nuclear winter might not be so bad. Canadians survive in ridiculously cold winter, so can everyone else. Other than causing global temperatures to drop, there's also another danger. On the flip side, deploying nuclear weapons could affect our ozone layer. It is estimated that there could be an 80% increase in the sun's radiation after the ash would heat up the stratosphere and accelerate the chemical reactions that destroy the ozone layer. This, combined with the soot and a drop in global temperature, would destroy ecosystems all over the globe, on the land and in the sea. Humans as well as other life forms get their food from those ecosystems. Without it, a global famine is almost certainly inevitable, especially in poor countries. In addition to black soot, nuclear detonations would create radioactive fallout that would be spread across the globe through the atmosphere. These poisons would cause rates of cancer to skyrocket, as well as birth defects and genetic anomalies.
So this is way bigger, way bigger. And for me, I feel as though if you're a president of a country, you should know that, right? You should know that, the risk of a nuclear war. You should understand what nuclear bombs do to the world. Let's just say, because he's obviously the president, so he must be educated, so he must know that. So now you're then being selfish. You're now saying that, okay, let's kill everyone on the planet, end this world because Ukraine is at war. Now, imagine if the people in Afghanistan or Iraq, Syria had made such a request, you would think it's absurd. Why? Because they're not white. It's an absurd request, regardless of your race. This is part 7 of your Dummy's Guide to What's Going On in Ukraine. My name is Kenim O, reporting from Washington, D.C. But here's my thing, because I don't want to be too hard on him, because I understand when humans are desperate, when humans feel as though their whole world is tumbling down, they're pretty myopic. All they do is think about themselves. And in a way, he's being very selfish. And it's not just him. We're seeing a lot of this coming from Ukraine.
Ukrainian women and Ukrainian children are in deep fear because of bombs and missiles which are going from the sky. And these are Ukrainian children who are there taking the hit. I see that my family members, that my team members are saying that we are crying. We don't know where to run.
And it's the mere fact that these requests come as though somebody owes them something. Ukraine is not a part of the EU, so it's not a part of the European Union. It's not a part of NATO. So all this aid that they're receiving is just based on generosity. When you look at it this way, it's generosity from the Western world. They're not in the EU, they're not in NATO. These European countries have no obligation to support Ukraine. And the only reason they're supporting Ukraine is because they're supporting European values, European and Western values of democracy. And it seems as though these values are going against Putin's authoritarian government. That's what it feels like. So this is where the aid is coming from. It's not coming from a need to support Ukraine. It's coming from a need to end Putin's regime, or whatever you want to call it, time in power. That's where it's coming from. So I just feel as though calling people cowards, saying all these things, why should people risk their lives? Why should people risk their countries for Ukraine? And especially when you see the way Ukrainians treat Black people. And let's also remember that the money that's coming from the US, I don't even know how much it is. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous amount of money. 44 million Black people in America are paying, that's part of their taxes. 44 million Black people in America. That's the population of Ukraine. Paying to support Ukrainians, and this is how they treat Black people. And then they turn around and make these comments.
We believe that NATO countries have created a narrative that closing the skies over Ukraine would provoke Russia's direct aggression against NATO. This is the self-hypnosis of those who are weak, insecure inside, despite the fact that they possess weapons many times stronger than we have.
As though the world owes them anything. Like, I'm not coming here to offend anybody. I'm coming here objectively. I am not on the side of Russia. I am not on the side of Ukraine. But asking the rest of the world to risk all the 8 billion people on this planet for Ukraine, well, that's an unreasonable request, if you ask me. And more to that, look at what has happened to Ukraine. Have you guys seen the footage? They have lost some of the most, historic artifacts. It's actually kind of crazy to me, because if Vladimir Putin really believed that Ukrainians were one of his own people, like he describes them as the brothers, this, that.
Tens of millions of fellow citizens and countrymen found themselves beyond the fringes of Russian territory.
We understand that Kyiv is where Russia began.
Rurik's successor, Oleg, captured Kiev, making it the capital of a new state, Kievan Rus. Alexander Nevsky's son, Daniel, founded the Grand Principality of Moscow, which quickly grew in power.
So we understand all those things. So you would think that he would want to preserve the art, the culture, the iconic architecture, but he doesn't even care. They are just destroying everything. It's quite devastating. And what does that say? If Putin will do this to his own brothers, as he has referred to them as his brothers, what would he do to the rest of the world? That question on its own makes us all cautious. Nobody wants to go against Putin. Nobody wants a nuclear war. Even Putin doesn't want that. But he wants to make a point. If I can do this to my own kin, Ukrainians, my neighbors, my brothers, I'm going to do worse to you around the world. So why do you think NATO, European countries are backing off? They can't support this. They can't have a no-fly zone. No, they can't go into war with Russia. That would be the end of humanity. And before you think it's dramatic, it's not dramatic. That is the reality of nuclear warfare.
According to a recently declassified document shared by nuclear historian Alex Wellerstein, the scientists at the Los Alamos laboratory decided that it would require somewhere between 10 to 100 super nukes to end humanity, as in a hydrogen bomb. And this was decided in the year 1945, way before nuclear weapons and multi-stage weapons were even developed.
So this is not going to happen.
President Biden has been clear that we are not going to get into a war with Russia.
And more to that, let's talk about Putin. Man, this man. And all these people in my comment section that are saying, let's go Russia, it's ridiculous. Just because Ukrainians treat black people terribly, as we're seeing in the media, just because they're treating black people terribly does not mean that we should support them being killed. You know, it doesn't mean that you should be on the side of Russia. I mean, everybody decide what you want to do. It's your decision. But I just don't think that is a reason to support Russia, because if Putin can do this to his own people, what do you think he will do to the rest of this world? That is the question. Now, Putin did make a statement, and he said, these sanctions are akin to an act of war.
Кстати говоря, те санкции, которые вводятся, они сродни объявлению войны.
He also said a no-fly zone would put us in a direct war.
Сделать бесполетную зону на территории Украины. Сделать это невозможно на самой территории Украины. Можно только с территории каких-то соседних государств. Но любое движение в этом направлении будет нами рассматриваться как участие в вооруженном конфликте той страны, с территории которой будут создаваться угрозы для наших военнослужащих. Мы в эту же секунду будем рассматривать их как участниками военного конфликта. И уже все равно, какими там членами они являются.
So he's made his statements very clear that he's ready to take some actions that have never been taken before in history.
Кто бы ни пытался помешать нам, а тем более создать угрозы для нашей страны, для нашего народа, должны знать, что ответ России будет незамедлительным и приведет вас к таким последствиям, с которыми вы в своей истории еще никогда не сталкивались.
That means he's going to go nuclear. That's exactly what that means. So we can't mess with Putin. In fact, these sanctions, I said this in my previous video, these sanctions could be dangerous enough to make him want to go to Finland or Sweden and attack them based on these sanctions. I just hope he's not going to be that reckless, but that could be the case. And he can still do that because they're not members of NATO. He could still do that. Take over any neighboring country that's not associated with NATO. He can still do that. And he's suggesting, that's the thing about it, Putin. He's very ominous. We don't know what he's going to do. We really don't know what he's going to do. We don't know what is in the mind of Putin, and you would never know what's in the mind of your opposition at war. You know, people are trying to paint him as this madman, all of these things.
You've had to study the minds of people like a Vladimir Putin. So to your best knowledge, what you know, your backgrounds, Daryl, I'll start with you, the mental state of Vladimir Putin. I mean, the word has been unhinged. Do you see him losing it?
I see him as being very calculating, and my background is in psychology, and I was a human officer, so connecting with and assessing other individuals is what I did on a daily basis. I don't think he's unhinged. I do think the last 2 years, the impact on mental health across the globe, Putin isn't, immune to that. So the same sense of isolation that everyone has felt over the last 2 years because of COVID has definitely changed a lot of people, including Putin. But he has already stated many times over what his intentions are, and we just need to listen more carefully. And if the world had risen up in this same way when he went into Georgia, when he went into Chechnya, when he went into Donbass and Crimea the first time, we might not be in this situation now.
I don't think that Putin's a crazy man. I don't think he's crazy. I think that he's made the request that he's made, and he just wants everybody to understand, back off. Mind your business. That's his point. This is between me and Ukraine. If Finland and Sweden join NATO, it's going to be their problem too. He's made his request very simple. And I think the West needs to just let him do what he needs to do. This is what he wants to do. It's unfortunate. Yes, every country should have the right. But what you should have and what you have are not the same thing. Right? Black people should be treated like humans. Are we treated like humans? No. We can see how they're treating us in Ukraine.
And when it was time to get on this bus, the Ukrainians said, just Ukrainians, literally as a black person. I even lied that I was pregnant. They didn't care. I was begging. The official literally looked me in my eye and said in his language, only Ukrainians, that's all. That if you are black, you should walk. And that was an additional 8 hours from where we were. By car, it was like 30 minutes. So we had to walk additional 8 hours. The problem isn't at the Polish border. It is at the Ukrainian border.
What should be done is not always what's done. And I saw a representative in Finland. I'm sorry, I don't remember what he was. I don't know if he was like a presidential figure or somebody. He met with Biden earlier this week. And he basically says, look, and I'm going to play the clip right here, but he says, if we back down, we're telling Putin that he can boss us around.
Russia's demand to, like they say, keep out of NATO, or they want NATO to stop taking new members, it might lead to a situation where Russia expects that it has kind of a say around its neighborhood, and that is not at all pleasant thing.
Well, guess what? Unless you want to destroy your country and make it look like Ukraine, you better listen to Putin. He's made one request. Do not join NATO. As long as he doesn't interfere with other things, I think it's worth it to back down. Unless Finland wants to start invading Russia right now, whilst they're not paying attention, which we know they can't because they don't have the same military power, you better just listen to Putin. That's what colonization looks like. It looks like dominance. It looks like having a dominant military and making instructions to a population. This is what your ancestors have done. This is why Europeans are the wealthiest in the world. This is why European and Western countries are the richest in the world, because of colonization. Now it is Russia's time. Am I on Russia's side? Absolutely not. But I want peace. I want peace. And the closest thing to peace right now is to back down. Just listen to Putin's one instruction. Do not join NATO. And I think NATO doesn't even want to take Ukraine at this point. NATO doesn't want to take Sweden or Finland at this point. Why would they want to do that? Why would they want to do that? And that's what Putin has done. He's playing chess. That's what he's done. That's why he's done this. because he knows NATO's going to back down. They're not going to take you anymore. They don't want to start a war. So forget it. And I think it's solved. I think it's pretty clear. Ukraine can keep fighting, but I think there are going to be some repercussions, unfortunately, for all this military aid that Ukraine is receiving from NATO. And I just pray to God that it does not mean that Putin's going to go and want to attack NATO. Like, they can send military aid, but who knows the way this man thinks? Who knows? Who knows? Anyway, so those are my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts. Leave a comment down below. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, all the above. My name is Kenim, and see you next time.